Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online special request character build with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you guys the Divine Monk. Now before I get started, disclaimer, this is a roleplay casual play build. This is not meant for meta play. So let's get started. So the Divine Monk is designed based off of the Khajiit character that you run into in the Elsewhere story. That is a kind of monk character. He uses dual swords, wears like really light looking armor, and somebody had asked me, is there a way you can make that into a character, because I really like the idea. And so I did some tinkering, messed around with some stuff, and somebody else had asked me a suggestion before: is there a way you can incorporate the Hellenals into a character build? Okay guys, so this is the first monk release. My second monk release. My first one was the Dread Monk. This is the second one, the Divine Monk. And yes, I do have more coming. So let's go ahead and get into this one by taking a look at the character screen. As you can see, we are called the Divine Monk. We are a Khajiit Templar. Now, in order for this to work, any race does work for it. I will tell you that now. So any race, it doesn't have to be a Khajiit, it can be any race. So as you can see, we have 64 points in the stamina. We do have 18k magicka, 22k health, 32k stamina, with a 1005 mag recovery, 448 health recovery, and an 855 stam recovery. Now, if you want to play this as anything else other than its design, which is primarily damage dealer, it can play healer and it can play a tank. To play healer, you take the 64 points out of stamina and you put it all into magicka. You guys probably guessed that though. Now if you want to play this as a tank, you're going to take out of your stamina, you're going to put enough points into health to give you 30k. Now this thing can play an off tank, and it can play a main tank for dungeons. Alright, now moving on. As you can see, we are using Hellenals because we do have equal weapon and spell damage. Now our spell crit and weapon crit we can't do a whole lot of different things with. So the best I can do is the Thief Mundus Stone. Alright. Moving on, we have 13k spell resistance with a 12k physical resistance. Now, you can get higher than this. You can get 13,000 physical with a 14,000 spell, but you do have to change some of the gear traits around and armor type, like the way it's crafted. Alright, we are using the Thief Mundus Stone. This is, unfortunately, the best option for this if you want to have high crit on both weapon and spell crit. So we do use tri-stat food. That is the primary food we use. And then going on into our equipment and inventory. Don't bother me right now. Don't do this, computer. So as you can see in our equipment inventory, we do use tri-stat pots for when we're tanking. We do use spell power pots for when we're playing healer. And when we're playing damage dealer, we use warrior power pots. Now, I have tested this as a tank, a healer, and damage dealer. It does work as all three, and I apologize for that, guys. Yeah. Alright, moving on. We do use the tri-stat food, like I said. Now, let's go ahead and go over the monster sets and the gear sets we're using. Now, we are using 2 crafted sets for this. In order for this to work properly, I had to craft the second set. So, our first set is Silatrix. Now, I tried 2 options here. I tried Silatrix and I tried, I gotta look in here. I can't remember the name right offhand, but it's the Sentinels of Ratukazuma, whatever, this one, as the option. So this is a really good offset to wear if you're playing healer, and if you're playing a damage dealer, Sentinels is great. So, Sentinels on the 1 piece gives you max stamina. 2 piece, when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create an earthquake under the enemy that erupts after 1.5 seconds, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 4 meters and stunning them for 3 seconds. This can occur every 5.5 seconds. Now this thing does go off like crazy because of how this build works. It goes off a lot. Alright, moving on to the next set. We are using Hunting's Rage. Now I tried several different sets with this, but Hunting's Rage worked the best in its design. So as you can see, our weapon, this set gives you weapon damage, weapon crit on the 2-piece, 3-piece max stam, 4-piece weapon crit, 5-piece weapon damage. Now moving on to the next set, and I already mentioned this is the Pelinal set. Now this is a 9 trait crafted set. So that means you have to have all 9 traits in order to craft this in jewelry and in the weapons. But it's a really great set in how it works. First off, the 2-piece gives you max health. The 3-piece, stamina. The 4-piece, mag recovery. 3-piece is stam recovery, 4-piece is mag recovery, and then the 5-piece. Your spell and weapon damage both become the highest of 2 values. So if you're using primarily weapon damage, your spell damage will equal out to the same amount. And that's what we're doing. We're using primarily weapon damage with this to give us that higher weapon spell damage output, and it works out really well. So now going over the traits and enchants, starting with the monster set, we are using Invigorating. The reason for the Invigorating is so we can get a higher health, magic, and stamina recovery added on to what we already get with the Pelinals, and this works out really well with this set. Now, moving on to the shoulders. Oh, sorry. This is light armor, by the way, and it's a light armor build. The whole thing is. So, we are using a Tri-Stat enchant here to hybridize the character. And then in the shoulders, we are using a max stamina, divines, light shoulders. The divines is so we can increase the effectiveness of our Mundus Stone. The max stamina is so we can increase our max stamina pool. Now, when you play this as a healer, I am going to let you know now that you can go to about 29k max magicka. But with as much spell damage as you have, you can more than effectively heal with that much. Alright, now moving on to the body, the chest piece. We are using a Divine's chest piece. Now, the reason I'm using Divines is because of the way I set this up. I was originally going to use Reinforced on the body with a heavy armor set, but I went medium on the chest because I wanted to go for that whole Kung Fu Iron Fist type thing. So we are using the Divines here with the increased Mundus Stone effect and the Tri-Stats, so we can hybridize. We are using 5 Divines pieces with this. Moving on to the gloves. These are the heavy armor, and this is that Iron Fist thing I was talking about. As you can see, we get 1386 resistance out of it, but we are using Divines here to maximize Mundus, and then the max stamina again to maximize their stamina pool. And then onto the belt. The belt is light Divines, max stamina, and then the boots are also light Divines, max stamina, and then the leggings are light Invigorating with a Tri-Stat. Now, the best option here is actually to go with a heavy chest, light gloves, medium legs. Now, the reason for that is you will get higher amount of resistances with this setup to where you actually go to 14,000 spell and 13,000 physical. So it's a lot better option to go that way. Moving on to the jewelry, we are using 2 Trirune rings here with the max stamina, max health, and max magicka, and then weapon damage enchants in both of them to maximize our weapon damage, but it also maximizes, remember, our spell damage. Now on the necklace, we are using another weapon damage because we do get the 2 recovery rates from Pelinals, the stamina and magicka recovery, which plays really well into the build. And then on top of that, we are using a Bloodthirsty here to maximize our damage output. but we do use the weapon damage again for having that increased weapon damage, because Pelinals doesn't give us any extra weapon damage. So we use 3 weapon damage here to maximize our weapon damage output. And we can get to about 4k weapon and spell damage. Now moving on to the weapons. We are using dual swords on both bars. And this thing is wicked. So going over the first bar, you can use different options and enchantments here. It's up to you. But I like this combination. It works out really well. We are using a sharpened main hand sword, Pelinals, with Awakening enchant. The Awakening enchant does reduce the damage that the enemies do against us, and being in light armor, that really helps us out. The Sharpen increases our physical and spell penetration, which is really nice. So it does give us that little bit of oomph to our character. Now, moving on to the next weapon, we are using a Nirnhone sword with an Absorb Stamina enchant. This is how we can maximize our return of stamina when we're on the front bar. And with the Nirnhone, it does increase the weapon damage of our offhand by 15 to 1535. So it's really nice. Moving on to the back bar, we are using a Pelinal sword infused with a weapon damage enchantment. Now this will increase both weapon and spell damage by 226, but it does primarily adjust our weapon damage higher, and it equals out with our spell damage, so we don't have to worry about the spell side with this. On the offhand, we are using again Nirnhone with an Absorb Magicka enchant. Because the way you do your rotation with this, you do light attack weaving on both front and back bars, so you will be getting Magicka Absorb and Stamina Absorb both effectively on your character when you're doing your rotation properly. Alright, now moving on to skills. Starting with class skills. I do take all the stamina-based or physical damage-based abilities in the first line, the Aedric Spear, so Biting Jabs, Binding Javelin, and Empowering Sweep all do physical damage, so I do take all 3 of those abilities as my physical damage stuff. And I do use these skills in different ways. Now I also unlock all the active abilities, ultimates, and passives for every skill line, and this is so I can play every role more effectively. With Dawn's Wraith, I get a lot of really good abilities I can use in a lot of different ways, and also this allows me to generate ultimate when I activate these abilities, and I can give my group and myself minor sorcery. It doesn't help for me though. Restoring Light, though, this is primarily healing, so this is where we're going to get most of our heals from, is from this side. Moving on to weapons, we are using primarily dual wield and only dual wield, so we only unlock the ultimate active abilities and passives from that line. If you want to learn other weapons like Restoration Staff, Sword and Shield, whatever, you can learn any weapon type you want with this character, but I chose dual wield because it works really good. Now, moving on to armor. We are a light armor build, so I took the active ability for the light armor and all the passives for light armor. With this, I get Prodigy, which increases my spell critical rating by 2191. And I get Concentration, which increases my spell pin by 4,884. So with that higher spell pin and that higher spell crit, abilities like this do X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 10 seconds, but it actually does a lot more than it looks, because this thing can do like 6k damage up on its initial hit and a lot of damage over time. Medium armor, I take the top 3 and the bottom one. This is so I can play more effectively with stamina, so I get the weapon critical rating higher, I get the increased stamina recovery by 4%. I also get the reduced stamina cost. Remember, I am a Templar, and Templars get 4% reduced stamina cost, Magicka cost, and ultimate cost. So this I can take advantage of. On top of that, we take the improved sneak, just to give us a little bit of boost to being like a ninja stealthy type. And then athletics, we can actually use this. On to heavy armor passives, we do take all 3 of the heavy armor passives because we want to take advantage of having the one piece of heavy armor but it also gives us resolve, which increases spell and physical resist by a small amount. Constitution, which gives us the return of magic and stamina whenever we take damage. It also gives us some health recovery, which we're not too concerned with. And then we get Juggernaut. We get 2% more max health. World Skills, Soul Magic, we do take the ultimate, active ability, and passive, the main ones. Now these 3 are optional, but the bottom 2 I would not suggest passing on. These are really good, Soul Summons and Soul Lock. Moving on to Guild Skills. We do use the Finders Guild abilities, ultimates, active abilities, and passives, along with the Mages Guild and the Sigic Order. And the reason why we unlock all 3 guild skill lines and active abilities and passives and ultimate is so we can play different roles in different situations, or we can play in different content and have access to abilities for those situations, like playing PvP or playing PvE or doing dungeons or doing trials or doing overland. Whatever we need the skill for, we have access to it. On Daunted skill line, I do take all the active abilities because they are all synergies, and I can actually use them all in my character's play style. On top of that, I do get both these passives. These are both very important. One is whenever you activate a synergy, you get X amount of resources back from that synergy. In this case, I get 992 health, 1,298 stamina, and 759 magicka. Moving on to the next thing, the Undaunted Metal. For this one, you get max health, stamina, and magicka by 2% per type of armor you're wearing. So that means if you are wearing heavy, medium, and light, one of each, you will get a total of 6% increased max health, stamina, and magicka. Now remember, with the heavy armor piece, the one heavy armor, you actually go to 8% max health with this. And then 20% from your CP. Alright, so moving on here, the Alliance War, we do take the ultimate active, passive, active abilities here that reflect our use of PvE play. Now, if you want to use this in PvP, you can, and you can actually use the passive and active abilities. Moving on to support, same thing, ultimate active abilities, and we do take this first passive because we can take advantage of these things in PvE. Now moving on to race. I like the Khajiit for this. Personally, I think it fits really good because they get robustness, which increases health recovery, stamina recovery, and mag recovery. On top of that, they get Lunar Blessing, which increases health, magic, and stamina by X amount. And then they get Feline Ambush, which is awesome for this build because you get increased critical damage and increased critical healing. This also decreases your detection radius of stealth by 3%. Moving on to crafting. Alchemy, medicinal use. This is I wouldn't say it's a super important one, because if you're not playing a lot of dungeons and trials, you're probably not going to be using a lot of potions. But if you are, this will come in handy. Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. These are both very, very good because they increase the duration of your food and your drinks by 20 minutes. So, alright. Now we're going to go over the skills we have on our bar. Starting with the front bar, we have Blood Craze. Now this does physical damage up front on its initial hit. It does X amount of damage over 10 seconds. And then on top of that, every 2 seconds you will heal for so much health. And that lasts for the duration of 10 seconds. So every 2 seconds in that 10 seconds. So 5 times you'll heal yourself. The next ability we use is called Biting Jabs. Now this does X amount of damage 4 times. So you jab 4 times and it'll do X amount of damage to the closest enemy and X amount of damage to the other enemies nearby. And the final strike reduces the movement speed of the enemy by 70% for 2 seconds. Activating this ability grants you minor savagery or major savagery, increasing your weapon critical by 2191 for 8 seconds. And it also has the chance of proccing a passive in this line called Burning Light, which you can see has the 25% chance to deal additional physical and magic damage, whichever stat is higher. And this effect can occur every 0.5 seconds. So with Biting Jabs hitting 4 times in a row, this thing can proc every hit. So Moving on to the next ability, we are using Ritual of Retribution as an AoE dot and heal. Now this does X amount, this will remove 2 harmful effects from yourself immediately, and then while in the area, you and your allies are healed for X amount, and your enemies take X amount of magic damage every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. Allies in the area can activate the Purify Synergy, which will cleanse them of harmful effects. All harmful effects from themselves and heal them for X amount. This scales with your highest offensive stats, so in this case, our max stamina. It does cost magicka though, and it does take advantage of the spell penetration. Next ability we have is called Reflective Light. Now this deals, like I said, X amount of flame damage on attack and additional damage over 10 seconds. But this can blast up to 3 enemies at one time. So each enemy will get hit by X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 10 seconds, and it also reduces their movement speed by 40% for 5 seconds. Upon activation, you gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical rating by 2191, and it does last for the full duration of 10 seconds. Our next ability is called Shrouded Daggers. Now this one's really cool. This one, you throw a blade out, it deals X amount of damage, and it'll bounce 2 times to other targets, dealing greater damage with each hit, and then also grants Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds. The last ability we have is called Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now this does X amount of physical damage up front, it does X amount of damage over 6 seconds, and then while slotted, your weapon damage is increased by 5%. Moving on to the back bar. Our first ability we have is called Purifying Light. Now this does X amount of magic damage, and it copies a certain portion of damage over 6 seconds and releases 20% of that as additional magic damage to the enemy. The maximum amount of damage you can copy is 11,385. This goes up based on your max magicka, so that damage, the maximum damage copied, will go up the higher your magicka pool. But when this effect ends, a pool of sunlight remains attached to the enemy, healing you and nearby allies for X amount of health every 2 seconds for the 6 seconds. The next ability we use is called Steel Tornado. This thing, basically, you spin around and you deal X amount of damage in a 9-meter radius around you, dealing the physical damage. Next ability we use is what we use to keep our back bar enchants going, and that is Deadly Cloak. Now this will give you Major Evasion for 15 seconds, reducing damage from area attacks by 25%, and then every 3 seconds the shrapnel will pulse, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 5 meters. Our next ability is called Radiant Aura. Now you can use another damage ability if you want here. I would suggest another damage over time ability or dot for this factor. But this is a really great ability because once you activate this, what it does is it applies minor magicka steel to all enemies around you for 24 seconds, causing you and your allies to restore 300 magicka every second when you damage those enemies. So if you hit every enemy with this, you're going to get 300 magicka, not per enemy, but every second that you spam this. So you're just going to get 300 all the time. And this will proc the magic recovery as well. So you never run out of magicka. Next ability is called Restoring Focus. Now this gives you Major Warden, Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resistance by 5,280 over for the duration of 20 seconds. You also recover 240 stamina every second. And then standing within the ruin increases your physical and spell resistance granted by 50%. You have a really high resistance pool, or resistances with this. So the next one we have is called Rend. And now this one, you slash your enemies, dealing X amount of physical damage over 16 seconds and healing yourself for 55% of the damage done. Now this ability is also a cone kind of effect. It will shoot out in front of you, and it's a 7 by 8 meter, so it's 7 meters long by 8 meters wide, and it does cost 144 ultimate, but it does do all that damage to any targets hit. So it's a really nice AoE damage. And that is the skills. Now I'm going to go over CP, starting with the red tree. And we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We took the 38 points and put it into light armor focus to increase our physical resistance by 3250 while wearing 5 or more pieces of light armor. Now, being a Templar, you get X amount of spell resist, and wearing light armor you will get X amount of spell resist. That's why we put all 38 into here, to maximize that physical resistance pool, to put it more on par with the magic resistance. Moving on, we have 31 in the thick skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. 43 in the hardy, and reducing your damage taken from physical poison disease damage by 10%. 43 in the elemental defender, reducing physical damage taken from flame, frost, shock, and magic damage by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 40 in the bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. We have 19 into quick recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. And then moving on to the green tree, we have 40 into warlord. This reduces your break free cost by 16%. We also have 16 into sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into bashing focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on to the middle green tree, we have 43 into mooncalf. This increases your stam recovery by 10%. And then 75 in Arcanus, increasing your magic recovery by 14%. Moving on, 40 into Tumbling, reducing dodge roll cost by 16%. 40 into Shadow Word, reducing block cost by 16%. And then moving on to the blue tree, we are hybridized here, so we have 43 into Blessed, increasing healing done by 10%. 23 into Elfborn, increasing critical damage and critical healing by 10%. And 43 into Elemental Expert, increasing your flame, frost, shock, and magic damage done by 10%. And then moving on to the middle tree here, we have 35 into Physical Weapon Expert. This increases your damage done with light, heavy attacks, and for two-handed, one-handed, dual-wield, bow, and werewolf form by 20%. And 40 into Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. And then moving on over here, we have 20 into Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 9%. We also have 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing your critical damage and critical healing with stamina abilities by 10%. And then 43 into Mighty, increasing your physical poison disease damage by 10%. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, I'm pretty sure you guys want to see what this thing looks like in action. Before I do that, though, I'm going to make a quick change. We're going to go ahead and take Steel Tornado off. And we're going to move Deadly Cloak over here and move this over here, and we're going to go ahead and grab the Fighters Guild Rearming Trap. This will give us 10% more damage from Minor Force, along with our Khajiit basically built-in Minor Force, and then the Templars built-in Minor Force. You guys will see this is pretty nuts. So I'm going to do a quick parse on this little guy called the Precursor, and then we're going to go up there to the target Iron Atronach and take on that one as well. But we're not going to kill this one. We will kill this one. This is to represent damage in a dungeon. This is to represent a damage inside of a trial or an organized group. Alright, here we go. So we did just 22,270 damage with this. And remember, this is a light armor build, but I do want to show you guys this. So our max stamina, or spell damage, goes up to 36,079 with a 48% spell crit and 47% physical weapon crit with a 3679 weapon damage. 90% critical damage there, 90% critical damage there. And this side we do get the 6,260 spell penetration. Over here we just get the 1,376. Now the nice thing about this is with having that lower max magicka, we boost our spell damage and we boost our crit damage and we boost our spell penetration to increase the damage output of our abilities. See, Reflective Light hit two different ways. One is the damage it does up front, one is the damage it does over time. So this is the damage it does over time, this is the damage it does up front. And I think we have the burning light down here too, which is from the biting jabs. And you can see it procced 6 times, 4 times were critical, and it did a decent amount of damage. Our light attacks do a decent amount of damage. Our shrouded daggers do decent, and so do our purifying light. So, but now we're going to go ahead and head over here, and we're going to actually parse on this. Now this thing is going to give me every buff I can possibly want. Warhorn, which increases spell and physical, or max magic and stamina by 10%. We're also going to get the one that increases our max health by 10%. We're going to get minor brutality, minor sorcery, major brutality, major sorcery. We're going to get it all. So, alright. So here we go. Potion, same rotation as last time. One, two. And we are going to use our Dawnbreaker this time. And as you can see, we roughly do about 28k. With a good rotation, you can get this thing up to 30k DPS. And remember, this is a light armor stamina damage dealer build. So the main reason why we use the light armor is to boost our magic damage and our ability to heal, basically. Not by much, but by enough. Again, this is what our spell damage and our max magicka looks like when we're parsing on this. So like I said, we do get the 10% max magicka. We go to 4,325 spell damage, 54% spell crit, 90% critical damage, and then we are at 100% penetration, and it doesn't really show that maximized there. And then over here we go to 35,000 max stamina, 4,325 weapon damage, 53% weapon critical, 90% weapon damage, or critical damage, and then the 136, whatever. But as you guys can see here, our damage definitely improved. Our burning light was proccing for roughly around 13k per hit. Ritual of Retribution was hitting on average for about 5k, 4k on, or 4k on average, max of 5k. And then our Shrouded Daggers was hitting for a lot, as you can see here. And then our Reflective Light was also hitting for a decent amount of damage. Flawless Dawnbreaker as well. And then, I'm trying to find the actual hit. There's the initial hit from Reflective Light. And this is the damage it did over time. So, I believe. No, this is the damage over time. This is the initial hit. So, because I did only cast it twice. One was a crit, one wasn't. But as you can see, this thing hit for 10k damage on average, 14k maximum. It's pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some adjustments to this build so I can take it into a dungeon and play it in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move that off there, and we are going to just grab our Adric Spear, Blazing Shield, and we are just going to jump right over to a dungeon. And of course, you guys know what that dungeon is. It is the Depths of Malatar, which was added with the Wraithstone DLC, and it is one of the latest dungeons added to the game because Wraithstone came out before Elsewhere, and is part of the Season of the Dragons release. So, kind of excited to show you guys this, because this is wicked. Excuse my excitement. I do have a reason to be excited. If you guys don't know, this thing is a character build that I actually enjoy playing a lot, and I went ahead and made my Khajiit character on live this same build. And I don't have the Pelinals yet because I'm not that cool with crafting on the jewelry side yet, but eventually I will be. So alright. This thing is so fun to play. Okay. Yeah, you died. Alright, going into the next room where the boss is. And this guy... this guy might hurt me a little bit, but we'll see. If I don't let him kill me, he will teleport. So I'm going to go ahead and back up and let him kill me. Because he'll go invisible and then I won't be able to die. So, but that is the Divine Monk, guys. I hope you guys like it. And I do have a lot more of these coming when I do the Bards and Monks releases. And these things are a freaking blast to play. All of them. Though I've tested it at different classes. So I've tested the Dragon Knight, I've tested the Divine Monk, or the Templar, I tested even the Necromancer with this kind of same setup, and all of them work so well, it's not even funny, and they're a lot of fun. So the Divine Monk is actually one of my favorites. The Dread Monk that somebody else had me try out, that's still viable, and then I do have, like I said, I have more. So don't think that the Divine Monk is the only Templar I have, because I do have another one that's actually kind of a little bit different. It uses dual resto staves. It's really crazy, but it still does a lot of physical based stuff, and it's just really fun. You guys will probably get a kick out of it. But that's it for this build, guys. Hope you guys like it, and if you do, you know what I mean. What's coming next? Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.